Velkommen alle sammen og god jul. This is just a quick general history video. Most of you guys have been following my channel for a while and you're very well read, so you know what I'm about to say in this video already, but there's new people coming into the beliefs and tradition all the time, so this video is for them. And there's a lot of people who come into our religion who are confused by this exact question. So basic summary, no, Yule and the winter solstice are not the same thing. In pagan times, it was originally two separate holidays at two different times. And when Christianity came in, they forced the pagans to combine the traditions from the two holidays and they put it on Jesus' birthday, and that's exactly why we celebrate Christmas the way we do today. So where did this all come from? The idea that Yule is supposed to be celebrated on the solstice is a completely new thing and completely wrong. This was brought into the religion when, the Norse religion first started getting some following in the US in the 60s and 70s, and what they did was they incorporated a lot of Wicca into it. We call this Wicca true today. It's people who have not necessarily read the sources but just read some Wiccanized versions of the religion that dated, like I said, back to the 70s. And this is probably what you have most commonly seen on the Wiccan Wheel of the Year. So originally, in actual pagan times, which we do have plenty of sources for this, Yule comes from the Old Norse word Yule. Now, Yule in the Viking Age was one of the three major sacrifices, and it was practiced in what would be now today in our modern January time in the midwinter, and it would have been a sacrifice to a good crop. We have a source from an old Anglo-Saxon historian, Bede, who mentioned that the winter sacrifice took place on a full moon at the start of winter in October time, and then after that there would have been a blot halfway through the winter, 3 full moons after that. And this was in England, by the way, when they were still pagan and practicing essentially the same religions as they did in the Viking Age. We also have another source, the Chronicon of Thietmar of Merseburg, which clearly states that this midwinter sacrifice would have been in January time. We even have primstavs actually that mark Yule and the solstice as two separate days, originally, like I said. But eventually what happened was one day in the Viking Age, when Norway was under the rule of King Håkon, he was a Christian king and he basically took Yule and he wanted to make the people stop being pagan, so he let them do the same traditions, but he moved it to the solstice. Don't say anything bad about King Håkon. Yes, he was a Christian, and at the start he forced his Christianity like many other rulers did, but he was the greatest king that Norway ever had, and towards the end of his life he actually reverted to paganism, and he was even said to go to Valhalla. But one of the things he did was change the day of Yule to be on the solstice, the birthday of Jesus, which in different sources from different times and sources in the Middle Ages and before, some of them put Jesus' birthday on the solstice actually, and some of it put Jesus' birthday on the 25th. But either way, you get it, the date was changed from originally the full moon in January into around the solstice time. Now, where Christmas came in is where it gets interesting. So, because the traditions combined not just one, but two pagan holidays, and that is Yule and Vettersolvvarf, so the winter solstice. And those were two completely separate holidays in pagan tradition, actually. Yule was the full moon in January, and the solstice was, of course, on the solstice. Where it gets fuzzy though. From the Viking Age sources, we have basically no records of any winter solstice celebration, but this is one of those things. Of course they had winter solstice celebrations like any pagan culture to ever exist. It's just we don't have records of it until later on in the folk tradition actually. So this is where a lot of the sources come from. But again, splitting up the two celebrations, Yule, I'm putting up a little source here on the screen explaining when and how that was celebrated according to the Viking Age sources. As you can see, there's only a few of those which may bear some resemblance to our modern Christmas celebrations. However, Vettersolvvarf, the solstice, and the traditions that we had and the celebrations and the folk tradition in Scandinavia all the way from the 1500s all the way up until the 1800s bear a very, very close resemblance to what we actually celebrate around Christmas. And by this time, you know, starting from when these folk tales and folk traditions come from, we first have them recorded in about 1500s. So this leads some people to assume that, oh, these were just Christian traditions. Oh no, this was long after pagan times. That was a Christian tradition. Oh yeah, Christmas tree. I'm sure that looks real Christian. I'm sure this thing was imported from the desert like Christianity was. How about the records we have from the Scandinavian folk tradition of going out on the solstice and sprinkling blood or mead on the trees? How about decorating it with red ornaments or fruits or things like that to symbolize the blood and the life force? Yeah, that doesn't sound very Christian, does it? How about another tradition of leaving food out for the household tomte in Sweden, or nisse in Norway, or other spirits, so they could come into the house and eat some of that food after we had had our feast? That doesn't sound very Christian, does it? How about the Yule book, which was originally, before this little goat came to being, the Yule book was originally a spirit that came around before the solstice to make sure that all the proper preparations had been made. How about walking counterclockwise circles around the Christmas tree in order to wake up the tree spirits? How about passing the food around the feasting table counterclockwise so this would continue the cycles of the sun? How about Christmas wreaths, or julekranse as we would call it in Norwegian? How about kransekake, like you see here, same thing? How about Christmas kringle? Same thing. I got a delicious one from a Danish bakery here. Problem was that it was actually in the shape of a pretzel, which is also wrong because kringle very specifically has to be in the shape of a ring. This is what kringle means actually. It means ring or cycle, but more specifically, a ring or cycle like a story. Compare it to one of our most famous sources from the Viking age, Heimskringla, which literally means the home story or cycle. You guys all see the pattern by now. All these traditions and all these things going in a counterclockwise circle. It has to do with the sun cycles and all these rituals and the traditions to influence the sun to keep turning and keep coming along its cycle, along with everything else. The winter solstice is about a rebirth, it's about a regeneration, it's about the solar cycles, and all of these traditions of the solstice revolve around that. That's what makes it different from what the original Yule was. And this is actually what the myth around Baldur's death and his rebirth symbolizes. And then what happened was, like I said, they took the pagan celebrations from the solstice. Even like I said, we don't have that many sources of it from the Viking age. They combined it with Yule, they put it on Jesus' birthday, and there we have it. That's why we celebrate Christmas as we do today. But pretty much everything was a pagan original. So that's all for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. It's a little fun Christmas video. Fire has died out, so I'm going to tend to that now. But that's all for today. Vi ses nästa gång.